Since you're clearly never gonna stop coming after me, allow me to properly introduce myself this time. As Ed spoke, everybody seemed to draw their eyes towards him, even those in the middle of their own fights like Katora and Kara. The only person who didn't was Toph. She knew full well who Ed was. And therefore, how badly you just fucked up, Ed continued. My name is Ed, Edward Elric, but back home, people tend to call me by a different name, the Full Metal Alchemist. Azula chuckled to herself in response. Full metal. Well, judging by your body parts, they must have quite the sense of humor in them, Azula said. She stared Ed down as she tried to force her face into more of a confident smile than she already had it in. She had just made what had to be the discovery of a lifetime. Alchemy. Something that wasn't bending but seemed to be much more versatile. She had a feeling that what this boy had shown her in their short fight was only scratching the surface of what he could do. She didn't know whether to be happier about that or the fact that she now had confirmation of what one of the avatars looked like. Of course, using that information would be another task entirely. She had to not only survive this encounter, but do it in a way that benefited her. Capturing all of her foes here would be ideal, but she wasn't sure if she would be able to. In fact, she was almost certain she wouldn't. Wait, Alchemist? Cora said. The word felt strange on her tongue, but it made sense. It was fundamentally different from bending, what he did. Alchemy, though. She didn't know what that was. In fact, she'd never even heard the word before. She would have to ask the boy once this was all over, if this ever got to be over. She glanced over to Katara. Katara was still fighting the woman with a knife in either hand. And unfortunately, Katara was barely holding her own. Even without bending, this woman was an incredibly skilled fighter. As a matter of fact, Cora was positive that Katara was beginning to lose ground. As for Cora herself, her fight was mostly going better. Mostly. The only reason she could actually stand against her opponent, the girl who could seemingly flip better than she could regularly walk, was because she had a very competent earthbender at her side. But that wasn't a guarantee of anything. The girl next to her, the one who was supposed to be her earthbending teacher someday according to Kyoshi, was an incredibly powerful bender, but because of this lady's attack, she was now down one arm. The fact that she was still holding her own was a testament to her skill. But even with that in mind, she was almost positive they couldn't win like this, as far as things stood anyway, so she decided that their main priority should be escape. In the meantime, Ed and Azula continued their battle. Ed headbutted Azula, clapping his hands and placing them to the ground as he made a staff that he used to bludgeon her into the stomach with. Instead of simply letting that happen, Azula grabbed onto the staff, digging her feet into the ground as much as she could, pushing herself forward, and by extension, pushing Ed back. Come on then, Edward, Azula sneered. Don't keep me waiting. Show me more of this fancy alchemy of yours. You scolded me before, didn't you? You all but said that my brother was a saint for putting up with me. You seemed quite angry about the matter. So why don't you make me be better? Ed growled, pulling his weapon towards him and shoving it to the right. It threw Azula off balance for a moment, as he took the opportunity to punch her in the face with his metal arm. I don't even need alchemy to kick your ass, lady. Really? I wouldn't go underestimating me just yet. She flipped into the air, spinning her feet into a helicopter kick that Ed just barely managed to duck underneath. The blue flames from her bending burning his hair. It was at this point that Cora put her plan into motion. She turned to Katara. Let's make a flood, she shouted. Katara nodded. She wasn't very good at drawing out massive waves, but with Cora's help, she just might be able to. The two of them began moving, shifting their weight in tandem, their hands moving in an arc that drew vast amounts of water out of the river next to them, water that they pushed onto the battlefield with as much force as they were capable of doing. Because Azula was off the ground in her kick, she was in an exposed position, immediately caught off balance and pushed away. She toppled over. Ty Lee did a similar thing. She was mid-flip in the air. The added weight of the water toppled onto her side and made her hit the ground, hard. The only person who managed to keep her footing among their enemies was Mai. But that didn't matter much, or at least it wouldn't matter for long. Ed got an idea in his head. With all this water around the ground, it made for the perfect trap, as long as he could be precise enough. He shook his head. Somehow, he had managed to stumble into trouble more times in the last few days than he had in weeks of home. It was almost impressive. Trouble, huh? He could almost hear the Colonel's voice in his head. Since when do you stay out of trouble, Full Metal? Ed laughed internally. If he had told that bastard what he had been through over the last few days, he was almost certain Mustang wouldn't be surprised. Ed clapped his hands together, dropping them to the ground as sparks of lightning moved around his palms, and the water around him twisted, swirling into the sky. That water dropped down, swirling around his enemies more and more until it froze them completely in place. Every part of their bodies now shrouded in ice, except for their faces. "Do you seriously think this can hold me?" Azula sneered. "No, not for long, Fireball. You made that clear enough," Ed replied, walking to the side of the riverbank and clapping his hands once again as he placed them on the ground, steam beginning to rise. "Now it can." "What, water vapor? Is that seriously the best you have?" "No, not water vapor. Hydrogen gas." Ed smiled. Azula's eyes widened as she looked down at him, as did Katara's and Korra's, all three of them swaying in their minds that there was no way Ed could be telling the truth right now. Changing the form of a piece of material was one thing, but this was on another level. "You seriously expect me to believe that you somehow managed to change one substance into another entirely?" Azula said, her tone making it sound like she thought it was nonsense. But she was no longer radiating heat from her firebending. She was, at the very least, wary. "No, because it's not another substance entirely. I figured you guys would at least know what hydrogen was, but with the way you think about other elements, you probably haven't put two and two together. Water itself isn't made of one thing. It's made up of a few others. Hydrogen and oxygen mixed together. If you understand that, you can get away with a lot of fun stuff. It might be impossible for a bender, but it's simple alchemy." Ed leaned closer to Azula's face. "If you try even setting off one spark in there, there's a good chance that you might just light yourself up entirely. You don't have to take my word for it. Human lie detector?" He turned to Toph. "Oh yeah, he's telling the truth," Toph said without missing a beat, a grin spreading across her face as she stuck her tongue out at their assailants. "And there you go. Don't worry, I gave you a little wiggle room. You should be able to thaw yourself out before hypothermia sets in." "Not until after I'm long gone, though," he replied, his chest puffing out a bit in satisfaction. He finally had the time and space to drop down to the floor and pick up the supplies that their assailants had made them drop when they dropped out and surprised him. Toph casually walked next to him, gathering whatever supplies the boy couldn't carry by himself. At this point, Ed wasn't going to try and take all of the supplies they'd managed to gather off the side of the road. There was way too much stuff, and at this point Ed wasn't going to trade supply for mobility. These people had managed to follow him every second of every day that he had been on this world. Whatever advantage he could get in getting away with them, he was going to take. Azula's annoyed face drifted into a smile. "Incredible," she whispered to herself. "No wonder I found you so irritating to fight. Alchemy. What an incredible discovery." "Do you think we can stow ourselves away on a caravan or something?" Ed asked his companion, no longer paying attention to his trapped enemies. "Probably, yeah, I think. But we'd have zero control over where they went, or..." Toph stopped as she observed another figure moving beside the two of them, picking up the crates that they themselves weren't able to carry. The figure in question stopped when they noticed her, allowing them to get close enough to her to see her face. "I can help you guys carry those if you want. I was kind of hoping to talk to you anyway." She smiled nervously. "Nice to meet you. I'm..." "The Avatar, right?" "I know." Ed narrowed his eyes at her. Korra flinched. She almost forgot that the boy seemed irritated that he kept getting mistaken for the Avatar. A lot, apparently. Looking at the mess beside her, she understood why. If she saw somebody who could do half the things Ed did, and she wasn't the Avatar herself, she would have no doubt in her mind that he was. Which, given how annoyed that made him, she made a mental note to never say out loud. "My name is Korra," she gave her best kind voice. "If you don't mind, maybe we could just chat for a little bit?" Ed was already poised to turn her down when Toph grabbed his shirt, pulling him down by her side. "Remember when I said that truth guy that you were looking for was probably a spirit?" she whispered. "The Avatar is pretty spiritual. They're both apparently the bridge to their world and ours. According to legend, anyway. So if you are planning to find out more about this thing, it wouldn't be the worst idea to at least hear her out." Ed took a deep breath, the sound of his breathing barely edging out the sound of Azula's controlled flame slowly hissing her way out of the ice, as she tried carefully to worm her way out of her prison without causing an explosion. "As long as we talk away from here, fine. They might not be able to use their fire openly, but it's still a hot day. Even if they're only creating embers, they'll still be out of there in a few hours." Ed replied, already walking further into the woods, Korra and Katara trailing behind both him and Toph. Azula wiped the last of the look of despair and irritation off of her face as she sighed, slowly letting herself smile as the others dropped out of her sightline. Well, I was certainly hoping for a better outcome, but we weren't here to win anyway. We weren't? Mai grunted, futilely struggling her arms against the ice. If you weren't in this to win, then why am I cold? It's not my fault. I told you to watch them, not fight them. Azula rolled her eyes. You were the one who said we would lose if we tried it again. I honestly would have expected better from you, Mai. Mai, in response, gritted her teeth in silence. You were just supposed to wait until I got Ty Lee, the Alchemist, excuse me. Abilities continued to get more and more confusing as I encountered him. This little hydrogen gas trick was by far the most surprising. I figured when we encountered him again, he might surprise me in a way I wasn't expecting, so I wanted to be prepared. Did you get a good look at his fighting style, Ty Lee? Azula asked. Kind of, the girl admitted. It was a little bit weird. He wasn't doing any kind of bending moves. Actually, most of his martial arts were pretty different than the stuff I normally see. I think I got a good look at the way he moves, but I don't think I can predict his attacks when he starts doing that alchemy stuff. Azula half expected that answer. The boy's fighting style incorporated his powers, not theirs, and as she now knew, he wasn't a bender. That's fine, as long as you can predict his attacks in general, Azula explained. And his arm. I wasn't sure if he was wearing some kind of armor before, but it appears that it's fully made of metal. Are you capable of performing your same feats on that? Oh, you mean chi blocking? She asked. Honestly, probably not. At least not in the way I normally do. I wouldn't even know where to start, it's a machine. The weak points are different than they are in a normal body. I think I might be able to make it harder for him to move for a while, though. Temporarily, anyway. As long as I manage to get the first strike in on him next time. Don't worry, you will, Azula replied, her tone of voice revealing another level of irritation that she had about this alchemist having yet another layer of protection against her. Once she captured him, she would have to ask about his artificial limbs, too. That was definitely something the Fire Nation could make use of. She wondered briefly if it had something to do with this alchemy of his. Maybe it was entirely unrelated. Everything about the boy was sprouting questions in her mind. I'm certain of it, as long as some of us can stay hidden next time, Azula replied. Mai found herself scoffing in response. How did you even get Ty Lee to come back anyway? I thought the circus was her calling. Ty Lee looked down, as far as her half-frozen neck would allow. She remembered the events of before, when Azula had come to see her. Azula showing up to her circus tent and asking her to join her group. How that asking turned into her circus nearly burning down. She remembered the feeling of fear replacing her regular feeling of freedom as she performed her regular circus routine. Honestly, chasing down the weirdest bender that she had ever seen felt a lot more safe than turning Azula down. She forced whatever feelings of fear as far down in her mind as she could. In doing that, she forced a regular smile back onto her face as she turned to Mai, practically laughing as she spoke. Well, Azula called louder. So, what's the plan exactly? Katara whispered. At this point, she and Korra were walking behind their two, hopefully new recruits, still holding a crate of their belongings. And worse, they hadn't exchanged a single word with them since leaving Azula and her crew behind. We've been walking for like an hour. You haven't even talked to them once. Yeah, I know, Korra replied dryly. I'm just saying, it was your vision, and I know, Korra said again. If anyone's going to make the ask, shouldn't it be one of the avatars? We're pretty far away from Aang, so... I know, Korra sighed. But you saw that. You saw both of them. There's so much more... She paused. Katara knew what she meant. The both of them were easily just as young as Korra and Katara were. Neither one looked any older than 14. But the girl was clearly a very experienced earthbender. Her skill with her abilities, even with one of her arms completely debilitated, was leagues ahead of what Korra could do. And the boy, he was clearly an excellent hand-to-hand combatant, and the bending he could do was insane. No, not bending, Katara corrected herself. Alchemy. And she didn't even know what that was, let alone what it could do. Korra sighed as she looked down. She couldn't even begin to understand how hard it was for them to master their abilities. What on earth was she supposed to say to people like these? Hi, I'm the Avatar, wanna follow me around the world? One of them was already mad at her for just being the Avatar. Hey, Sloppy, I can feel your heartbeat going through the roof, Toph shouted ahead of her. Wait, Sloppy? You mean me? You can hear my heartbeat? Korra asked. Feel it, through the ground. It's how I see things. Toph replied, casually lifting her hair up to reveal that her eyes didn't reflect light. Cora flinched at the new information, completely caught off guard, her mind struggling between surprised and impressed. Whatever you're nervous about, can you just spit it out already? Sure, yeah, absolutely, yes, Cora said, stopping. She dropped the supply bag she was carrying onto the floor and smacked herself lightly in the face to enhance her focus. Katara stopped in place next to her, her silent presence giving Cora the bit of emotional support she needed to go forward with this. So, you already know that I'm one of the avatars, right? She gestured to Ed and Toph. Oh yeah, you did mention there were 2 of those, Ed said quietly to Toph's nodding. And as one of the avatars, I'm a bridge to the spirit world, and the spirit world is connected to, well, everything better than the physical world is. Because of that, my mind is prone to, I guess you could call them, visions. Like the world itself is trying to guide me. Or, I guess, ghosts in this case. She laughed nervously, remembering Kyoshi. Suddenly, Cora was very much missing fighting back there. It seemed a lot easier than talking now. Cora always found fighting easier than talking. And? Toph asked. At least that was all she did. When Cora looked at the boy next to her, the second she said vision, she seemed to have lost him. He seemed almost irritated. It made her think that he probably had some kind of bad experience with spirits in the past. She was just thankful he wasn't writing her off entirely. And in order to end the 100-Year War, me and my fellow avatar, his name is Aang, by the way. He's actually in the city right now. She paused, pointing over to the large spiraling towers of Omashio. We need to master all 4 elements. We need to band the world together so we can stop the Fire Nation and take down the Fire Lord. Wait. Ed raised his hand. Wait. Are you telling me that the leader of the Fire Nation is the Fire Lord? His voice sounded incredulous, as though this basic fact of their existence was somehow ridiculous. Katara and Korra looked at each other, confusion sprawling across their faces. Yeah? Korra finally said. Oh, did I not mention that? Toph asked. No, you didn't mention that. Ed's eye twitched. How does anyone take this guy seriously? Well, in all fairness, 100 years of death and destruction will probably make you take a guy seriously, Toph replied next to him. Korra blinked, not exactly knowing how to respond to that. The last person she met who didn't know anything about the war was, well, Aang. And even Aang knew who the Fire Lord was. She forced herself to keep going in the moment. Well, anyway, one of the visions that I got was of you 2. And because of my connection to the spirit world, I was able to talk to one of the last avatars in my vision. She told me that you would be integral to my journey. That you would be my earthbending teacher, she gestured to Toph. And that you, she turned to Ed, had a power to completely turn the war around. That you would be an invaluable teammate. And judging from what I've seen so far, I think she's right. So, I kind of have a big favor to ask. Can you come with me? Wait, come with you to what now? Ed tilted his head. Come with me on my journey, or on our journey, she gestured to Katara. To learn all 4 elements, to face the Fire Nation, to put an end to 100 years of bloodshed. Nope, hard pass, Ed replied. It was silent for a moment, both Korra and Katara flinching at his harsh rejection. Katara quickly stepped in front of Korra. Wait. I know you guys are probably on your own journey, but she is an avatar. Aren't you gonna at least give her request a little bit more thought? Katara asked. Proof of either of the avatars hasn't been seen in over a century, but you just saw it firsthand. She bent multiple elements. Isn't that enough to at least hear her out a bit more? I wasn't doubting that she was the avatar, Ed replied tiredly. To him, it seemed like a pretty simple checklist. Find somebody who can move more than just one thing and boom, that's the avatar. At least according to what he had heard from others. I just don't care. I thought you might ask me for a favor or something quick. I'm not about to dedicate myself to a whole war, though. Katara quickly turned to Toph, who shrugged. Hey, don't look at me, princess, Toph said. I already agreed to follow him around the world, so if he's not going with you, I'm not going with you. Wait, so she agreed to follow you around the world already? Korra asked, turning to face Ed. I didn't ask her to. She just decided that on her own, Ed replied. Toph shrugged. I sure did. He's pretty interesting, she replied. Korra silently nodded to herself. This did mean that there was no way that she was going to be able to convince them both separately, but it also gave her an in. She didn't have to convince them both to come with her. She just had to convince the golden-haired boy. That was a good thing on some level. On the other, he was already proving to be the immediately more difficult person of the two to talk to. But she had one thing on her side. She might have not been the best talker, but she was persistent, and as far as she was concerned, that was all that mattered. She walked up to him again. Maybe we just got off on the wrong foot. I'm Cora, she said, smiling. Ed, he replied. Yeah, Edward Elric, right? She asked, the name sounding just as weird the second time she heard it. It didn't follow any naming convention that she had ever heard of, though she supposed she had only lived in 2 of the 4 nations. You said you were also called the Full Metal Alchemist, right? Is that some kind of title? Is it a spiritual one, or? It is a title, but it is not a spiritual one. Trust me, it's about the farthest thing from it. It would take way too long to explain, Ed replied. Well, if you joined us, you'd have the time, Cora joked. Ed's face made it very clear that he wasn't amused. Okay, wrong thing to say. Listen, you've been chased by the Fire Nation for a while because you were confused with me and my fellow Avatar, and I'm really sorry about that. But because of that, you know what they're like. Not just in the distance, but up close and personal. Ed found himself shrugging. Yeah, sure, she's a nut job, he replied. Exactly. They're full of people like that. I don't know where you're from, but you have to have seen the devastation they leave in their wake. The devastation that's spread everywhere all around the world. We have a real chance to stop that, and you have a real chance to help. She hoped she was doing a good job at this whole inspirational speech thing. If she had to pick which one of them was the talking Avatar, it definitely wasn't her. Even as somebody who wasn't fond of being the Avatar, Aang still had a way with words. He'd probably be doing a lot better than her in this situation. Look, war sucks. It's stupid and awful and senseless. Trust me, I know, Ed replied. But I still have things I need to do. Stuff that's way more important to me. More important than putting a stop to the Fire Nation? More important than finally bringing peace to 100 years of conflict? This time it was Katara's voice that chimed in. She seemed almost irritated. There was a sharp tone in her voice that only sharpened with every word she spoke. Yeah, Ed said, not flinching. Much. To be honest, this war really isn't my business. If Katara was a little irritated before, this pushed her over the edge. Not your business? She asked, the irritation in her voice building. Cora put a hand on her shoulder, signaling her to step back. Katara grumbled as she complied. If you have something else to do, I understand. You're probably already on a mission or journey or something, right? And if you are, I bet it's dangerous. Otherwise, I imagine you already would have finished it, considering how capable you are, Cora said, determined to steamroll past Ed's resistance. So, if you two have some kind of goal, maybe I can help with it, and in exchange you can come with us. That way you're not just helping us, we both get something we want. Ed pinched his brow. If he was actually going to get help from these people, if he was actually going to be around them, the chances were it would be a good idea to tell them everything about his situation, which meant telling them where he came from, or at least his theory on where he came from. He was already nervous enough about telling Toph when he did. Her human lie detector powers probably helped her believe him a lot easier than she would have otherwise. He highly doubted that another random person, cosmically important entity or not, was going to do the same. That doesn't seem like a good idea, he replied. Are you sure? Not to toot my own horn, but the Avatars have historically gotten a lot of stuff done. Your friend did say that your problem was spiritual in nature, right? That's technically my job. You don't even have to join us permanently, just for now. If you feel like you have to go, we'll let you. It's not like we're holding you prisoner or anything, right? Ed paused. It was technically a lead, and a good one at that. We are wandering blindly right now. I'm just saying, Toph replied. It's not like they can drive us off course when we never had one. Couldn't be the worst thing in the world. No, I've already lived through the worst thing in the world, Ed replied dryly. After the day that started everything for him and now, after October 3rd, there was nothing in his head that could ever reach worst thing ever territory ever again. Though he had to admit, the universe really did have a knack for testing his patience, or he supposed the universe is now. It was nice to know that no matter what dimension he washed up in, it seemed to have a personal vendetta against him specifically. At least the cosmos was consistent. Fine, he said. Wait, you agree? Really? Cora asked excitedly. Please don't make me say it again. Heck yeah! Cora clapped both of them on the back. You guys aren't going to regret this, I promise. Regretting it already, Sloppy, Toph muttered. Ditto, Ed muttered back, their discomfort drowned out by Cora's nervous laughter. By the time the newly formed group had arrived back in Omashu, Sokka himself was already waiting with Aang outside of the kingdom. Only one of them looked pleased. Katara waved over at the two, rushing to their side as she hugged her brother. "Geez, you look pretty worse for wear," she joked. "I look worse for wear? What about you?" Sokka replied. "What, did you run into Zuko?" The tone of his voice meant that as a joke, but seeing the serious look in his sister's eyes, his body locked up, froze in place like a statue. "Wait, seriously?" he shouted, stepping back. "His sister, actually," Katara replied. Sokka's eyes widened more. "That psychopath has a sister?" he reeled. "He sure does, and apparently she's much more of a psycho than he is." She laughed. "Whoa, so you guys had a tough time of it too, huh?" Sokka asked. "You guys had a tough time? What happened to you?" Katara asked back. Sokka turned to her. "It's a long story, but apparently Aang's earthbender pal Bumi is still alive, and the king, and insane." Sokka's eye twitched. "Needless to say, we went through it. And when I say we, I mostly mean me." "Bumi was testing me," Aang laughed nervously. "But I passed, I guess," he laughed. Sokka pinched his eyebrow in response. "At least we're finally safe." "Wait, where's Korra?" Katara grimaced. "With our new arrivals." "Oh, so you found them?" Sokka glanced over his shoulder. In doing so, he saw Korra, nervously leading the two new people to their group, the people she had described from her vision. He didn't know what to picture from the descriptions themselves, but... Wait, those two are it? Seriously? "You got a problem, Wolftail?" Ed asked. "You guys asked us to be here, you know," Toph replied, cleaning out her ear with her pinky. "Yeah, we did, but aren't you guys supposed to be all legendary and stuff? According to the spirits, you're a big shot who doesn't even need bending." He pointed at Ed. "You're pretty short for being such a big deal, though." Without saying a word, Ed sighed, clapping his hands and placing them towards the ground. In an instant, two giant rocks shot out of the ground, taking the form of fists. Fists that grabbed the boy and yanked him towards the floor, pinning him to the ground instantly. Ed got up. "Short, huh? I look pretty tall from up here, don't I?" He grunted, his eye twitching. "What kind of crazy power do you have?" Sokka shouted. Toph, meanwhile, smirked. "So, height's a soft spot for you, is it?" "Good to know." "Push that button at your own risk, Badger," Ed replied dryly. Meanwhile, Korra lifted the restraints on Sokka with her bending as best she could. She gave the boy just enough space to wriggle out as he got up beside her. "Maybe don't antagonize our new allies 5 seconds into meeting them. I barely convinced them to come with us in the first place," she said. "Wait, really?" Sokka shot up. "You did pull the Avatar card, right?" She nodded. Sokka, in response, turned to Ed and Toph. As he did, he grabbed both Aang and Korra, pulling them to his side. "Maybe you didn't sell it well enough. These are the Avatars, you know, masters of all 4 elements, the only great weapons in the war against the Fire Nation." "I'm not sure how I feel about being called a weapon," Aang said quietly. "Might not be the best wording there, Sokka," Korra agreed. The boy didn't respond to them, instead trying his best to amp up his showmanship personality as he presented them to the two people they had already met. Korra crossed her arms. Apparently, that's not a big deal to him, and the war isn't his business. "I see I made a great impression on you," Ed said sarcastically. "Seriously, though, the war's not important to you?" Sokka muttered, his eyes widened in disbelief. He knew there were probably people out there who didn't think about the war as much, but to not care about it altogether, he just couldn't picture it. "Trust me, I have my reasons," Ed replied. Toph smirked next to him. "He really, really does," she said, crossing her arms. While the others were staring at the boy, trying their best to figure him out, Aang was doing something different. He was still staring, but he didn't really look at him the same way everybody else did. Instead, Aang was focused on a different fact. The fact that Ed, for some reason, didn't seem to care about the war, passed over him. The fact that he didn't seem to care about the Avatar was the one that stuck. He didn't look at Aang like he was anything special. He didn't have any reaction to Korra's presence either. He truly didn't care about the Avatars as a concept. He didn't view them as any more important than anybody else. Aang almost found himself smiling at the thought. He walked up next to Ed, introducing himself as he held a hand out. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Aang." Ed stared down at the boy's hand, awkwardly taking it in his own. "Yeah, Ed." In response, Aang smiled cheerfully. So cheerfully, in fact, that it caught him off guard. The others seemed not necessarily happy with his presence. So, Ed really wasn't sure what he did to provoke such a positive reaction. Yeah, same here, he said, those being the only words that his brain could produce in the moment. As much fun as this little meet and greet is, now we have two groups being chased by the Fire Nation in one place, Sokka said, crossing his arms. Which means apparently two members of the royal family are going to be after us now. And one of them is apparently pretty close, considering you guys fought them like an hour ago. I say we get away from here, as fast as we can. That's easier said than done, Ed replied. We've been moving non-stop since we grouped up, and that psycho still keeps up with us. Yeah, you're right about that. Not a moment's rest, Toph replied. She's been on her heels every second of every day. We're constantly fighting. It's been really fun, she said, her smile growing wider. Really fun, huh? Sokka asked incredulously. Certainly never feels that way when we do it, Katara muttered, every memory of her group encountering Zuko flooding through her mind. Really? You must be doing it wrong then, Toph grinned. This brought a laugh out of Korra. The girl before her was someone who clearly liked fighting. That meant Korra was probably going to like her. We might be a bit better at getting farther than you guys are. No offense, but we have a better mode of transportation. You'll see, Korra replied cheerily. Both Ed and Toph found themselves blinking in confusion, but they did follow their new team members in silence, both of them wondering how they planned to move a group this large this quickly, as they claimed to be able to. That was until, on the path, they noticed a roar up ahead of them. A loud, bestial sound. Toph leaned over to Ed, her eyes widening as she whispered, I feel something on the ground. Something really, really big. Yeah, well, I see something really big, so I guess we're even, Ed whispered back. Tell me that you people don't seriously ride this thing, he said, looking up at the giant creature that towered over all of them. Oh, we sure do, Aang shouted. This is Appa, my flying bison. I'm going to need you to tell me that you didn't just say what I thought you just said, Ed grumbled to himself. He was currently trying his best to not shout bullshit at the top of his lungs. Trust me, man, I felt the exact same way, Sokka replied. It's true. True? What do you mean it's true? The thing must weigh like 10 tons. How on earth would it... Bending, Toph gasped. Badger moles dig through the earth, and I guess sky bisons dig through the sky? She muttered to herself. Ed's mind took a moment to catch up with the rest of his body. You know, the more I learn about bending, the more frustrating it gets. Really? With the crazy magic you have at your fingertips, this is weird? Korra joked. Alchemy isn't magic, Ed replied, irritated, soon yelping as the ground erupted beneath him. The new force from the floor launched him directly on top of the bison, landing with a thud. Stop being such a baby, Full Metal, Toph said, doing the same thing to herself with her bending, as she too landed much more gracefully on top of the bison. Wait, Full Metal? Sokka asked. Yeah, the Full Metal Alchemist, apparently. That's what people call him where he's from, Korra said. I have about a million questions about that if I'm being honest, but I'm waiting till we're in a place where they can't run away from us without it being inconvenient. Are you really that worried they'll just take off? Aang asked. They did agree to come with us in the first place, right? Yeah, they did. Just barely, Korra muttered to herself. The only reason they agreed to come was because we might be able to help them with something, but they weren't super forthcoming with that something. I'm trying to figure it out. If I can't help them, I'm not sure they'll stay, and I can't fumble teammates who are so important that the spirit world brought them to us. Yeah, I mean, that's important and all, but... Alchemy? Sokka asked. Have any of you ever heard of it? No response came from his question. Yeah, neither have I. Isn't that weird? He made hands fly out of the ground. That's creepy. How has nobody ever heard of this power existing before? The others were silent. The obvious answer was that it was simply impossible for something like this to be kept a secret for so long. But clearly it was. There was something ominous about that. Eventually, however, Aang shook himself out of his stupor. Relax, guys. Kyoshi sent them to us. If the spirit world thinks we'll make a great team, then I trust them. Aang smiled, using the air around him to lift him into the sky, easily a dozen feet, as he gently landed on top of Appa's head. I wish I had your confidence, Korra replied. She climbed on top of the bison with Sokka and the others as they all took to the sky, leaving the city of Omashu slowly in their wake. They passed most of the ride in silence, each of them individually staring at the other as they tried to figure each other out. It continued that way far past when they landed, arriving at their new campsite. They were starting to set up as the sun went down, or rather, they had just finished. Both Ed and Toph used their powers to create their tents in mere moments. Ed even helped the others put up theirs, a few moments of complaining from them being all that was necessary to convince him. Creating a tent out of alchemy was a lot easier than being nagged at in his mind. So, this mission of yours, are you gonna finally tell us what it is? Cora asked. Both Ed and Toph went silent at the question. It would be hard for you to get anything out of this if they don't know what you're looking for. I'm just saying, Toph offered. Yeah, I know, Ed muttered, turning to the others. They were silent as they watched him, only the roar of their campfire spreading through the night. Fine then. You guys know a lot about this spirit land thing, right? Spirit world, actually, Toph corrected him. Yeah, right, spirit world, Ed shook his head. Cora and Aang looked to each other. Yeah, I guess that's right, Cora replied. As the avatars were considered the bridge between the human and spirit world, Aang continued. If you have a question about the spirit world, then I guess we're the most qualified people. Okay, well that's good to know, Ed said, feeling a little bit better about his decision to come with these people. But if I'm being honest, I have less a question about it and more a question about someone living in it. A spirit, I think, Ed replied. What do you know about a guy named Truth? Once more, Aang and Cora looked at each other, a look of concern spreading across their faces. If we're being honest, we haven't really met many spirits yet, Aang replied. We're both pretty new to the whole Avatar thing. Of course you haven't, Ed lowered his head. Just because we don't know now doesn't mean we won't know soon, Cora blurted out. Being the Avatar is a long-haul thing. We'll get better over time, so the more you tell us now, the better equipped we'll be later. I guess that's true, Ed admitted. Cora silently breathed a sigh of relief. She had done it. They would be sticking around, at least for now. So, why do you want to find this spirit exactly? Aang asked. Ed looked away in response. Toph turned to him. If I believed you, the avatars probably would. They're almost as weird as you are. Almost, Toph said, her words making the others heavily focus their attention on Ed. Well, they aren't human lie detectors, Ed said back. You're worried about us believing you? Believe me, man, after what our team's been through, I doubt things can get much weirder. Whatever you're about to tell us can't be that crazy, Sokka replied. Ed, in response, laughed dryly. Trust me, you'd be surprised. You have a metal arm, Cora said, the others looking to her in surprise aside from Katara. He does. His leg is metal too. Ed, in response, sighed, rolling up his sleeves to reveal his automail. Sokka was the first person to freak out about it, backing up as though he had just witnessed a possession, while the others simply sat stunned. What? How? Does that technology even exist? He asked, turning to the others. Not as far as I know. Weird, right? Cora replied, smiling at the blonde boy. Not to mention your weird powers, your hair, your eyes, even your name. Her smile grew wider. Nothing about you is normal, so whatever you're about to tell us, honestly, it would just fit in with what we already know about you. Oh hey, that's what I said, Toph said, smiling as she nudged Ed. Don't worry, if they think you're crazy, the two of us can take off. I'm way more interested in your situation anyway. Ed allowed himself a smile as he turned to her. Believe it or not, I appreciate that. He was silent for a while, not allowing a single breath to escape his lips as he slowly looked down at the floor. Okay, fine, he finally said, taking a deep breath. What would you say if I told you that I knew essentially nothing about bending? Nothing about the Fire Lord, the Fire Nation, the Earth Kingdom. Nothing about the world in general, really, outside of what Toph told me anyway. The others looked at each other in response. None of them quite knew how to respond to the question. The closest experience any of them had had to what Ed was saying was Aang's. He had been frozen for 100 years. He knew very little about the world in general, but he did know about the world, just not the last 100 years about it. True to form, though, he was the first person to respond. I would say, I guess I'm kind of in the same boat. I was frozen in ice for a century, the boy admitted. Ed froze in response. Wait, frozen in ice? Like, completely? How does that even work? Wouldn't you have suffocated? As Aang shrugged, Toph glanced over to her companion. Really? With what you're about to tell them, you're confused about his situation? I guess that's fair, Ed replied, even if internally he was convinced that his way of getting here was still a lot more reasonable than being frozen in a brick for a century. Though, considering what he knew about the homunculi, he supposed that wasn't impossible. Though he did doubt that the boy before him had a philosopher's stone embedded in his chest. So, that's it? There was just another person who was frozen in time? Katara asked. There was still a bit of suspicion left in her voice, though. It didn't seem likely to her that a person who wasn't an avatar could survive such a thing. Besides that, Aang still had a general knowledge of most things, and he definitely cared about the state of the war, given how invested he was in things before. Frozen in time? No. I wish it was that easy. Ed shook his head. So, what? Amnesia? Sokka asked. No, I remember everything there is to know about myself, and everything about where I come from. I just don't come from here, Ed replied. Where I come from, there is no bending. Nobody's even heard of the Fire Nation, or the Fire Lord. This war of yours, the one that's been going on for 100 years, it isn't a thing. Korra paused. She didn't know what to say in the moment. Possibilities went through her head. Maybe the boy was from a super isolated part of the world. That still wouldn't explain benders not being a thing there, though. And if she was being honest, she doubted there was a place that the Fire Nation hadn't touched in some capacity. But it did have to be true. Kyoshi herself pointed her towards this boy. She doubted her former self would have done that if he was just some delusional person. Not to mention she had seen his abilities with her own eyes. Meanwhile, Katara found herself irritated at the implications of this. A place on the planet that somehow the Fire Nation had never been to? A place where nobody had ever heard of them? Their war had devastated the whole planet. She could maybe buy that there was a place hidden enough that hadn't been affected by them, but it was a hard pill to swallow that they never even heard of them. If a place like that did exist, why couldn't she have grown up there? She wondered to herself. She shook off the thought. Either the boy was lying about where he was from, or where he was from was so willfully ignorant that they prevented their kids from knowing what was going on in the outside world. If she was being honest, both possibilities disturbed her. Where? Katara finally asked, locking eyes with Ed. From the look he was giving her, she had a hard time believing he was lying. There was earnestness leaking through his eyes. She made the decision to trust her gut. She had already decided in her mind that the second option was the most likely, which was unfortunate, considering how angry it made her. Where are you from? It's called Amestris, Ed replied. Oh yeah, that... Nah, I can't even pretend. I've never heard of it, Sokka replied. I'd be surprised if you did, Toph said. I didn't, and I guarantee my family made me a lot more well-read than yours. Hearing that, Korra made a mental note to ask Toph about her family when she got the chance. Whatever information they taught her was probably useful to them. I'd also be surprised if you did, Ed continued. Though if I'm being honest, it would be a relief. It would debunk a theory that's made my life way too complicated recently. I don't think I'm from this world. Sokka blinked a few times, letting the sentence sink into his mind. In the end, he was only able to form a one-word sentence. What? The sentiment was echoed by Katara as well, and Aang. About the only person who didn't seem to find it strange was Korra. When Kyoshi mentioned this boy, she mentioned that it was like he just showed up out of nowhere, that the spirit world itself didn't seem to take notice of him before recently. It didn't really make sense to her before, but now... Huh, she muttered to herself. Huh? Just huh? Sokka asked. How are you acting like what he said isn't crazy? Is it? She asked. Think about it. You've never seen this kind of bending before, right? Not bending, alchemy, Ed corrected once more. And it's actually pretty common where I come from. Right, yeah, your alien planet, Sokka replied. I'm not an alien. I'm just as human as you are. I just don't think this Earth and my Earth are the same one, Ed replied, irritation seeping into his voice. Yeah, right, of course, because there are a bunch of Earths out there, Sokka said back. Even if that was true, how did you even get here? Long story, Ed groaned. He was stuck in another dimension or something and opened a portal to get out. Isn't that right? She looked at him. Ed looked back at her. That is the short version, right? Gee, Ed's voice rang over her shoulder. Way to make me sound less crazy. Hey, it's not my fault that your life's insane, Toph replied. Though you were probably right. Being a human lie detector did help me believe a lot of this. Well, for what it's worth, I believe you, Korra said. The others looked at her like she was crazy, but she smiled to herself. Believe it or not, what Kiyoshi said backed this up pretty well. Well, if you believe it, I trust you, Aang replied. His voice twinged with a bit of sadness. If what the boy was saying was true, he was even more alone than Aang was when he woke up. Even more alone than he was when he realized that there weren't any airbenders left, or that all of his friends were probably dead from old age. He was away from everything, nothing familiar to hold on to. He didn't want anyone else to go through that. Katara looked at Ed. Does the Fire Nation really mean nothing to you? At all? She watched closely at Ed's face as he shook his head. Aside from the bizarre name, no. You guys really stuck to the theming thing. It's pretty weird to me, if I'm being honest. It's just one of a million things about this place that completely freaks me out. Ed replied, his voice sounding casual even though he nearly flinched at the very close look the girl was giving him, like she was studying every aspect of his face, trying to pick him apart with her eyes. I think I believe you, she said quietly. Thanks, Ed replied. His voice showed how clearly confused he was. Even if he was hesitant to look a gift horse in the mouth, he was deeply tempted to ask why. Thankfully for him, the girl before him explained. It's not your powers or anything like that. Sure, those help, but I just don't believe that there's any place on the planet that doesn't know about them, she said, looking down. Ed paused as he listened to her. There was clearly hurt in her voice. She sounded a lot like Scar when he talked about his people, when he talked about Amestrians or state alchemists. The anger in Scar's voice matched the sadness in hers. Fine, even if you do believe him and everything that you're saying is true, why don't you just open a portal again and... Sokka looked into Ed's eyes, remembering his words. The spirit messed up your portal. That's why you're looking for it. Okay, I think I'm caught up now, he sighed. I guess I have no choice but to believe this too. You don't really have a reason to lie to us. Sokka scratched the back of his neck. Well, I appreciate the generosity, Ed replied sarcastically. See? And it all works out. What did I tell ya? Toph slapped Ed on the back. No muss, no fuss. Surprisingly, Ed replied. I expected a bit more resistance, to be honest. Well, when your past life tells you something, you tend to listen, Korra replied. Ed had vaguely heard that the avatars reincarnate, but he wasn't sure if he believed it before now. Past life, Ed muttered. Is that just a belief or like a provable thing? He asked. Oh, trust me, it's a provable thing, Korra replied, Aang nodding alongside her. Now that I know you're out of your element here, we can explain some stuff to you if you want, Aang replied. It's mostly gonna be me. Aang's a little out of the loop too, Korra continued. Knowing that the most awkward of the situation was now over, Toph got up, stretching. You guys can do whatever you want. I'm going to bed, she said, walking over to her makeshift earth tent and slamming the door shut with a simple shift of her foot. Ed looked towards the others who were still awake. The people who were willing to give him a crash course on the place that he hopefully wouldn't be in too long. If he wanted to get home, he would need to survive long enough to do so, and so far this place had been blindsiding him left and right. Maybe this little deal was already starting to work out for him. Alright, might as well, Ed said, crossing his arms as he began to talk the night away. Ed didn't notice when he fell asleep. He was in the middle of a history lesson involving the Avatar cycle, and how the last Avatars had apparently been killed along with an entire group of people called the Air Nomads. That was the last thing he remembered. If he had to guess, his time running away from the Fire Nation's crown princess was starting to catch up with him. The exhaustion that he built up running for days on end was building up in his body and finally let out. When he finally opened his eyes again, he could hear banging on the other side of the tent. He didn't remember walking into the tent. His new teammates must have carried him in here after he passed out. He made a mental note to thank them later as he got up. I'm awake, give me a minute, he groaned. We don't have a minute. Apparently we're going into town. He heard Toph's voice on the other end. You have 10 seconds to open this thing or I'm gonna do it for you. 10, 9... Ed clapped his hands. The tent wall came down as his vision filled with the sight of Toph's smug grin in front of his face. She also looked tired. There were bags under her eyes. Clearly it wasn't her idea to be up this early. What, decide to spread the misery? Ed asked. Why are we going into town? We don't need supplies. You and I brought more than enough with us for the entire group when we boarded the impossibly flying mammoth. Bison, Toph corrected. Yeah, right, bison, my bad, that makes much more sense, Ed said, pulling himself out of the tent and pulling his jacket onto his body. He looked around. The others were talking in hushed tones, concern practically etched onto their faces. For the love of, please tell me that Princess Fireball's not back, Ed replied. There was no way. There was no way that she had managed to catch up with them this quickly after Ed left her frozen in a block of ice. If she did, then she wasn't human. Thankfully, no. We're officially safe, Toph replied. From those Fire Nation soldiers, anyway. As an occupying army, they tend to, occupy everywhere. That unfortunately makes sense, Ed replied, looking around. He saw his new group looking around each other. They were whispering to each other, like they were scared of their words reaching any passerbys. Like if they somehow did reach a passerby, they would be in a lot more trouble. Does somebody want to explain to me why I'm awake at the crack of dawn? The others looked over at him. Their faces were a mixture of different emotions. The predominant one that he saw was a twinge of fear. We saw an earthbender, Katara replied. Wait, what? And? He glanced at Toph. Isn't that supposed to be a normal thing on this continent? Hey, don't look at me. They just got back and told me to wake you up. I'm as in the dark as you are, she replied. The second we saw him earthbending, he ran away. It was like he was afraid of us, Katara replied. That thought did give Ed pause. As capable as this group was, they were still kids, and if there was one thing Ed knew, it was that people tended to underestimate him because he was a child. He doubted that them as a group were intimidating enough to make people run in fear. If he is afraid of you, then shouldn't we just leave him alone? Ed asked. This doesn't seem like much of an issue. Toph nodded in agreement. It might be one thing if Sloppy and Twinkletoes still needed an earthbending teacher. Twinkletoes? Aang muttered to himself. Korra looked over at him. It's better than Sloppy, she muttered to herself. But as of right now, you already have the greatest earthbender on the planet tagging along with you. So I say we skip this city and move on with our lives, Toph replied. Well, bluntness aside, they do have a point, Sokka said. Upon those words leaving his lips, Katara gave the boy a death glare. If this guy is scared, there has to be a reason for it. We can't just ignore that. He could be in trouble or something. Aang nodded. If there are people in trouble here, it's our responsibility to help them, isn't it? He asked. Ed paused. The way they were talking reminded him of conversations that he and Al had had in the past. How they went about problems. Every time they went somewhere on a lead to get their bodies back, they would inevitably get involved in something or another. If someone was in trouble, they couldn't ignore it. It just wasn't in their nature. Even now, with Ed in the situation that he was in, one that should have made him want to mess around with another person's problems the least that he ever had, he couldn't help but have his curiosity piqued. He could just move past this. He should have just moved past this. Just went on with their journey, hopefully run into something mystical. Something that would get him back home. But if he did, he wouldn't be himself. And he wouldn't be the brother that Al was proud of. Ah, shit, Ed muttered to himself, grumbling as the others looked towards him. What does this guy look like? He said. Huh? Katara asked. This earth mover bender guy, what does he look like? Ed asked. He was silent as they went point by point on the kid's description. His long brown hair, his tan skin, down to the clothes he was wearing that day. By the time they were done, Ed let out a sigh of irritation. As he began moving, Toph practically cackling to herself as she moved next to him. Wait, where do you think you're going? Sokka shouted. What does it look like? I'm going to check it out. Didn't you just say that this wasn't our business? Sokka asked back. It isn't our business, Ed replied. Unfortunately, sticking my nose into other people's business is practically my job. Believe me, however annoyed you are right now is nowhere close to where I am. Korra cracked a smile as she turned to Aang. I think I like this guy already. Aang nodded. Agreed, he said, grinning. Clearly the boy had a good heart. Do you want to catch up? He asked. Is that even a question? Korra smiled back, the two avatars rushing to the side of their new earthbending teacher and their new otherworldly friend, respectively. The only people left remaining on the campsite were Katara and her brother. They've been a part of our group for less than a day and they're already calling the shots, Sokka said. I hope you're happy. At least he's on your side. He crossed his arms. Yeah, he is. To be honest, I wasn't really expecting that, Katara replied quietly. She stared at the back of the group's head as they continued walking. Her emotions were mixed in the moment, partially conflicted about how she was acting towards the boy before, and partially thankful for how he was acting now. Even if he was acting a little brash, even more impulsive than Korra had a knack for doing. Well, we should get going. We don't want to be left behind, Katara offered. Sokka grumbled as he nodded. Yeah, I would hate to have that happen to me. The siblings nodded to one another as they made their way towards their new destination. So, Ed began, which way did you see this guy go again? He asked as they walked into town. Katara didn't say anything, instead choosing to look away from him. Okay, Ed replied. I guess we're just gonna keep wandering around until we find him then, he said, realizing that she hadn't caught a good enough glimpse of the boy to be able to tell him any useful information. Katara sighed. I wasn't the one who charged forward without a plan, you know, she said, crossing her arms. She does kinda have you there, Full Metal, Toph replied, pressing her hand against the ground. The town's not that big anyway. We probably only have a few places to look. Plus, Aang offered, looking around town isn't a bad idea. It's a good way to get a lay of the land. Korra, meanwhile, was silently surveying the area. The town looked normal enough. She didn't see any major signs that something was wrong. That was upon first glance. Korra had been living in the Earth Kingdom long enough to know what a Fire Nation presence looked like there. And unfortunately, she was starting to see those signs right now. The area was quiet, very quiet. People weren't out on the streets in great quantities. Barely a handful of people seemed to even dare to go outside. The shops in the area seemed barren, but the people running them looked like they were desperate for sales. As she had to guess, they weren't being paid for the goods that were taken from them. Fire Nation soldiers didn't tend to like to pay for anything, after all. Every warning signal was firing in her head. They were likely going to be in for a fight if they weren't careful. Almost as if the universe itself was fighting her, the second that thought crossed her mind, she heard something. The gruff voice of a Fire Nation soldier who had just walked into a shop. The man was apparently mentioning something about a protection fee. A sentence that was basically universal language for extortion money. The second Ed heard it, he immediately began walking in that direction, not stopping for a second. He continued right up to the door of what seemed to be a small family hole in the wall, and before anyone could stop him, he reached up to the dark suit of the Fire Nation soldier and tapped him on the back, the man spinning around to face the young boy. Hey, you're blocking the entrance, Ed said, a harshness beneath his tone that made the others in his group flinch aside from Toph. The soldier before him sneered, leaning down toward Ed, merely an inch away from his face. Come back later, kid, he said. This shop's a little busy at the moment, in case you can't see. Oh, I can see. I can see a guy with a head too big for his shoulders blocking the way I want to go, Ed replied. The reactions of the group were mixed. Toph nearly had to bite her own tongue in order to keep herself from laughing. Korra herself was also pretty amused. This was exactly the kind of way she used to behave when she was in the Earth Kingdom. Though she was also a bit concerned since that behavior did lead to her getting captured and in shackles. Aang himself was laughing nervously. He was sure his group could probably take this man in a fight if they had to, but he would prefer not to deal with this in a violent way. Plus, he wasn't sure how far the situation would escalate. A sentiment that was shared by Sokka, who was already looking around to see if there were other Fire Nation soldiers in the area. Katara, oddly enough, seemed to agree with Ed's behavior. At least that's what it looked like to the others as she walked next to him, staring daggers at the person in front of them. The soldier didn't back down. Instead, he leaned down and laughed in Ed's face, grabbing the boy by the shirt and lifting him a couple of inches off the ground. I'm gonna give you one last chance. Go stumble back to your mommy, pint size, before I get angry. Ed's hand twitched, his bangs falling over his eyes as his voice rang through the area. What did you just call me? Ed asked quietly. His automail arm reached out and grabbed the armor plate that adorned the soldier's chest. Toph took a step back, already seeing where this was going. She gestured for the others to do the same, all of them following suit except for Katara. Go ahead, say it again. I dare you. He really has a thing about his height, doesn't he? Sokka whispered. It really hasn't come up much before, Toph shrugged. But man, is it fun. What, you think I'm scared of you, shrimp? The man said, his laugh melding with his voice. He wasn't able to get out another sentence. The second that last word left his lip, he was suddenly reeling back from the force of a full-force headbutt from Ed. A headbutt that forced the man to drop Ed to the ground. The second Ed's feet hit the floor, he swung his automail leg to kick the man directly in the stomach. Getting your ass kicked by a shrimp, huh? Must make you feel pretty pathetic. Katara blinked. This doesn't feel much like it's about helping the shop owners any. The soldier tried to conjure a flame in his hand, but Ed grabbed it, slamming it against the wall, as he grabbed the man's face and slammed him back into the floor. I'm gonna let you go, 'cause I'm nice like that. And when I do, you better run as far and as fast as you've ever run in your entire life, or we're about to have a real problem. Get me? Ed whispered. The soldier before him shivered as he nodded. When Ed let go, the man began running, sprinting like he was competing in an Olympic tournament. You won't get away with this. I've seen your face. You just made an enemy of the Fire Nation, kid. Ed sighed as he dusted his hands off. Oh no, whatever will I do? He mumbled to himself. Did you have to make trouble when we just got here? Sokka asked, his head hanging down. I'm sorry, are you gonna tell me that guy didn't have it coming? Ed replied. Before Sokka could even respond, his sister did. No, he definitely had it coming, she said quietly. Ed looked over at her. She seemed to be lost in thought, like she was replaying a memory in her head. He almost felt tempted to ask, as if they actually knew each other well enough for him to pry. Thankfully, before his mouth could make that mistake, the owners of the shop walked out into the open to see them. One was a woman. She looked to be in her 30s or 40s. There wasn't anything strange about her, nothing that drew anybody's eyes towards her. It was the other occupant of the shop that seemed to surprise certain members of the group. A teenage boy, dark black hair parted on either side of his tan face. It's him, Katara said, stunned. The earthbender I saw this morning. The boy before her seemed to flinch at the nod as somebody had seen him out in the open, but nevertheless he looked at the group with a smile that he couldn't hide. What you just did, that was incredible. Nobody's ever stood up to the Fire Nation like that here. The woman with him, nonetheless, had a different reaction. She looked upon all of them, her eyes folded in sadness. Yes, there was a reason for that, she said, swallowing hard, forcing the ball of nervousness that she clearly had in her stomach down. What have you done? Hey everybody, thank you so much for checking out another episode of The Avatars and the Alchemist, my only non-Earth OCU series. As always, I had a ton of fun writing it, and I'm still having a ton of fun working on this series more frequently. It's really helped me stay creative, and it means a lot that you guys enjoy this series and continue to support it, just like my Earth OCU stuff. I really, really look forward to the next video, and I hope that you guys do too. But in the meantime, as always, if you like this video, please feel free to let me know by leaving a like, and be sure to comment to let me know what you liked about it. Finally, feel free to subscribe so you don't miss out on the future of this or any other series that I produce. In the meantime, I've been your captain, and it's been a genuine pleasure to take you on another tour of the strongest Earth in the multiverse. Goodbye, and thank you so much for watching.